Hey everyone, I'm Robert with AWS, and I am here in Boston today for our first security conference, Reinforce. I'm joined by Quint Simon, Head of Public Policy for Southeast Asia. Quint,
Hi everyone.
please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks so much for having me here today, Robert. Really excited to be at our first conference. Hope there's many more. So my name is Quint. I look after public policy for our Southeast Asia region, which basically means it's my job to talk to regulators and policymakers every day as they shape the regulations about how our customers can actually use the cloud. And I think a lot of people, when they hear regulators and policymakers, their immediate thought is, compliance burden, cost, slow movement, frustration, potential changes as new administrations come on board. But I think myself and my public policy team, we really try to have empathy and understanding of sort of where regulators are coming from. I mean, if you take a step back and you look at even 10, 15 years ago at how policymakers or regulators would make regulation, it really was a case where there would be a new technology with pretty clear and defined players, which maybe they had 6 months, a year to come up with a policy for. The pace of innovation today is just incredible. As you know, back in 2012, I believe, we launched 80 new services. Now in 2018, we launched over 1,500 services. Regulators are having to keep up with that incredible pace of innovation. And meanwhile, I think regulators were used to dealing with one or two players, so like a financial services regulator was used to working with its banks, but now we're coming in and saying, no, you have to understand the technology and understand how it works. You need to work with us as a service provider and as a vendor to really understand the policy before you actually create it. I think regulators are just under tremendous, tremendous pressure to try to keep pace. And so that's really where our team steps in to really try to be of support and assistance to policymakers and regulators as they make the policy that will affect all of our customers today.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, most of the time when we hear about regulation, it is, as you said, the conversation is approached from the perspective of the developer or the company that's trying to build the service, and they see regulation as a hurdle or a tax. It's very interesting. I'm really eager to hear your take on this from the other end of the spectrum, which is, yeah, these policy makers, these regulators, they don't have an easy job. And what are the things that we're doing to kind of make them a partner?
Yeah, that's exactly right. I think we really try to apply our leadership principle of customer obsession to regulators. We try really to think about them as not a customer that we're selling to, but a customer that needs to understand cloud computing and all the services that we offer in order for them to be able to actually make decent regulation for the field. So we try to apply that mindset, and we think about regulators as customers and ultimately as partners. And certainly I can share from my experience. I think regulators, especially in the more developing markets and even in the developed ones, are so eager and understand that they need support in order to be able to really develop regulation that makes sense for the industry. I think they are honestly trying to balance innovation and the digital economy and Industry 4.0 with the need to make sure things are going right and the need to ensure that our customers are actually using our cloud services appropriately. And so they do have to kind of strike that balance. Now, where my team comes in, we really try to put at least one local person in every country in which AWS operates so that we can really engage directly with the regulators as they craft their policy to understand the technology. In many ways, we kind of see ourselves as facilitators and the kind of bridge between the regulator and AWS. So often we spend a lot of time creating opportunities for the regulator to meet our experts, and that could be from security assurance, that could mean our SAs who deeply understand how our customers are using the cloud, and could also mean all of our service teams who actually do deeply understand the various services that we have. So for us, we really see ourselves as that bridge. We hold just countless hours of workshops and trainings for the regulators to understand the different technologies. Often regulators actually want help writing their policy, so they'll put out a request for submissions on a potential future policy document, and we'll assemble the internal teams within AWS to actually create a written response to government saying, this is a great policy, you're going in the right direction, but unfortunately from our experience, these 3 or 4 requirements are going to make it really burdensome for our customers to be able to continue to use cloud services. And really, I think regulators are very open-minded and they want that support. And so we just have a really great partnership, as you said, with regulators across the world.
I'm really encouraged by what I'm hearing because it is very difficult for governments to do these jobs, government agencies to do these jobs, and what I'm hearing from you is there's a lot of education going on, there's a lot of bi-directional communication, there's a lot of cooperation going on. That's incredible. Is there a specific example you can take us through of some of these policy-making decisions? Yeah,
so maybe I'll just start with kind of a more general kind of journey that we've seen regulators really around the world take. I think especially with the word cloud is a little bit of a scary concept for regulators who have never been exposed to the technology, who are not technical specialists, and who really think of the cloud as difficult to control or difficult to understand because it's kind of up in the air. So we often see countries start out with a pretty, what we would call a no cloud policy. Where they're actively discouraging cloud adoption, where they'll have an outsourcing moratorium. So especially in the highly regulated industries, they'll specifically say banks and fintechs or telcos can't use cloud. That's always the starting point.
Oh, I've heard that. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think there's another interesting thing I've heard. This very funny phrase like, there's no neck to strangle. Have you heard that? Can you tell? Is that a thing?
That is totally a thing. They have this fear that there is a loss of control. And again, regulators are in a really tough position because they get punished when things go wrong, but never rewarded when things go right. And so they feel they need that connection with a human, whereas AWS, we operate at scale, so we don't always have that, and we need to really help them understand the technology so they don't need that human interaction in all cases. So it always starts with that no cloud policy. And honestly, it varies, but I would say in my experience, it takes 1 or 2 years even to move them on to the next phase of the journey, which is what we would call kind of a no objections policy. And so that's usually when a government will come out with, say, an outsourcing policy, so how a bank or a fintech can use cloud, which says, okay, you can use cloud, but you have to seek my approval every time you want to put any customer data or any significant workload on the cloud. You need to have, in some cases, data onshore or some sort of mirror onshore. Or you just can't put any core banking or core applications on the cloud. That's what we would call kind of a no objections policy. I love this photo that's on the slide. This was actually the Monetary Authority of Singapore, which after a few years of being educated on cloud and better understanding it, got so frustrated with everyone saying, the regulator won't let me use cloud, that they actually went on stage at their own FinTech festival and said, stop, everyone, we have no objections to the use of cloud.
Just to be clear.
Just to be clear, everyone.
Yeah. And I think the other problem with this is that not only does it take time for the regulator themselves to change and get educated, it takes time for that message to get propagated through to the organizations, right? Because in this case, you can have an organization like the MAS go and say, our stance is no objections. But then there are organizations with VPs and executives who've been burned by this before, and they're still on the no cloud policy for their own organization, despite the fact that the regulators themselves have changed. So in a way, the regulators are actually ahead of the industry. Do you see that much?
We definitely see that. And that's why I think what Monetary Authority of Singapore did was so forward-looking, because they said, we want our industry to move forward. We know cloud is the future. So we're going to stand up in front of an audience of tens of thousands of people and make it so explicit so that there are no more doubts. And it really did change the industry. We are actively encouraging regulators in other parts of the world that, again, have very pro-cloud policies or at least no objection policies to do something similar and actually come out and clear up that fear, uncertainty, and doubt that we think affects a lot of our customers.
Yeah.
The other thing that we do is we really do work with regulators, again, as they go on their journey, to adopt more clear policy positions that really do not only say that, okay, we have no objections to cloud, but rather that cloud is the way forward. Cloud is the way that you improve your security posture. It's the way you better manage your data. It's the way that I, as a regulator, can better audit and supervise my regulated institutions.
Yeah.
And that's where we see a lot of updated outsourcing guidelines that say, please use cloud, no approvals required, put core banking on there, by all means, go for cloud. And then in some of the even more mature countries, we'll see these cloud first policies, which often are government saying to itself, we're going to choose cloud over traditional on-prem environments. And that's really where we see the game changer. When government says that's what we're going to do, that clears up the FUD in the industry and everyone starts moving.
Yeah, and I think you made a very important statement in there that I think we take for granted by working at AWS, but really, this is a message that takes a long time to sink in and permeate throughout the rest of the industry, which is that the cloud can actually bring security benefits.
Correct.
A lot of companies, a lot of industries, especially the heavily regulated ones, when they start with a no cloud policy, it's from a position of good intentions where I think it's going to be less secure.
Yes.
Right? But what's really happening there is, this is the devil I know.
Yep.
And over there is the devil I don't.
Correct.
But I think in that kind of position, it's easy to miss out on the potential upside, right? So for instance, when you're on premise, you've got your own data center, some DBA or some developer could have a server stashed away under their desk, plugged in, running a business critical workload. It's a single point of failure that nobody knows about until it breaks. But when you move to the cloud, you now have visibility over your entire infrastructure, so you know what's running where, who has access to it. You have audit logs.
Exactly.
We have all these tools at your disposal to tell you when we've detected unauthorized access. We have automated remediation policies. So I think that the point that you made is it's very profound, because it actually goes so deep. This is kind of the reason why. Like I think this needs to be clear. Like, this is the best outcome for everyone. This is not some sort of like arm twisting.
Win-win.
Yeah. So tell us about this last step where you have the cloud first policy. I see down here we have this screenshot that the Philippines announced the cloud first policy. What does that mean? What has that done to that country and that industry?
Yeah, so Philippines is such a leading example, because I think they came out with their cloud first policy in 2017, and it was the first in the Southeast Asia region. And that really, again, sent a signal to those who were saying, the regulator doesn't want us to use cloud, to really say, no, actually the regulator is the one who understands the cloud value proposition and is instructing all government agencies to move to cloud. And that, again, was just such a powerful way to clear up the FUD. But back to your point about the sort of game-changing nature of cloud, we believe that it is as game-changing for regulators as it is for our customers. And so we do actually spend a lot of time working with our regulators to understand our services like AWS Config, like CloudTrail, like CloudWatch, that really do enable them to do a level of supervision that they could never have done in the past. And when we go into them and present the fact that no longer will you send in the audit team and the day before everyone fixes everything and it shows up green, but really it was probably just fixed in the last 24 hours. But know that now with the cloud, you have access to all the trails and you can see everyone who's logged into the system and the real life application of the policies. That's always the game changer in our conversations with regulators, and that's what gets them to move to that cloud first step.
That's inspiring. It would be just seeing a government take the lead on this. That is inspiring.
It's very cool. Way to go to the Philippines on that one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think to your point, really I see our job in the public policy team as ultimately to address regulator concerns. And really, helping them in their journey as they work to regulate the cloud. And so we do get, very common questions. I cover 10 different countries in Southeast Asia, and I often hear the same questions being repeated over and over. So I thought it might be, interesting for our viewers to hear a little bit about, the top of mind questions that we do get. To our discussion earlier, is the cloud safe? It must not be safe because I can't touch it under my desk. I can't physically see it. That's a question we get all the time. And how is it different than on-prem security? Because often guidelines are written still with an on-premise model in mind, and so they're struggling to think, well, how do I write my regulation in a way that works for cloud without disrupting my existing regulatory frameworks? Mm-hmm. So with that in mind, we do so much education on the shared responsibility model. We do deep dive security briefings. Some of the regulators ask for 3, 4, 5-day trainings where we bring in all of our experts to really deep dive on the security in the cloud, security of the cloud, all of the concepts of cloud security, and that always inevitably, again, results in a deeper understanding of cloud and how it's game-changing for regulators. We're also getting into a place now where we run like hands-on workshops for the regulators so that they actually get AWS accounts, they log in, they know how the platform works. And I think, again, that gives them a sense of comfort because the cloud goes from being that intangible thing to something that they understand and can actually manipulate themselves.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. Trust, I think trust is the word of the day here in the technology space. So we spend a lot of time working with them to understand our compliance programs, the 53 plus certifications, attestations that we have. We actually walk them through our audit reports. Again, we help them understand our supervisory tools that actually help them be better regulators. So that's a big piece of what we do too. A third kind of question that we often get from regulators is, okay, so we understand AWS, but cloud service providers, there's so many different ones. How do we know if what works for you works for the others in the sort of ecosystem? And so for that, like our industry associations are really important because they're actually a platform for us to engage even with our competitors in the same group and say, no, across the industry, we see this is best practice, we know that this works from a regulatory perspective, and we're not fundamentally that different in how we view cloud security, even though we may offer different services, and obviously we would argue our services offer a level of security that we're really proud of.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of it. When we write submissions, we also write it often as an industry, so that the regulators actually know it's coming from a voice just beyond AWS.
So speaking of cloud service providers, we heard Steve at the keynote at Inforce this morning, and he was saying that we have this holistic approach toward compliance and regulation at AWS, where he was kind of saying that other cloud providers, what they might do is they might take a whole bunch of unrelated policy and regulation efforts and just create a pile of them, and it's not actually actionable, it's not actually useful. Can you give us a little bit deeper sense of what he means by that? How does that affect the work that you are doing, and how does the work kind of make its way into an end-to-end service that delivers these kinds of guarantees, especially for example, in like highly regulated industries?
Yeah, so I think what we are really good at doing, and something that I'm really proud of, is that because we get to work with regulators, we do get a sense of their thinking and the motivations behind their regulations. And so that's why when we actually write policy guidance for our customers, the white papers that the teams write, the sort of guidelines that really spell out the regulations, we can often point our customers in the direction of really understanding that thinking that is going on behind the scenes. And then I just think that the way that we present the artifacts and the way that we present the ways that we do help our customers meet those regulatory compliance obligations is really powerful and really unique. And so I think overall that creates a really compelling value proposition for our customers. In some very unique cases, not always, we even will do joint engagement with our customers, with the regulators, so that the regulators are not only hearing from us, but are also hearing from our customer who wants to run regulated workloads. And that sort of three-way communication is also a really great way to show our customers that we want to be deeply engaged in the conversation and we want to help them with their relationship with their regulator.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so another question on my mind is, these are the things that we're doing in Southeast Asia that you're directly overseeing. Do you know to what extent this model is being applied elsewhere in other regions? Is it the same play? Is it as successful? How is it different?
Yeah, so we do this everywhere. We have a really great global public policy team that I think has great representation in all parts of the world. The really useful thing about having policy people on the ground, really again everywhere in the world, is that we can also offer a unique value proposition to regulators. Regulators always want to know what is best practice and what are other regulators doing. And I, again, totally understand that sentiment because they don't want to be in a position where they're doing something different or out of line or that might disrupt the the development of the digital economy in their country. And so I get to work with my public policy colleagues in different countries to say, hey, what's working in Europe? Hey, what's working in the Americas? And then we'll bring the sort of best practices and bring the regulations and actually share them with the regulators in Southeast Asia. So it's a really seamless team, and we pretty much do all of this stuff all over the world.
That sounds incredibly cool.
It's really cool. It's a great job. Yeah. Everyone should work in policy. It's honestly the best field ever.
Honestly, I was not that bullish on public policy work, but after hearing from you, this really sounds interesting, right? Because I think you're showing us a lot of the upside that everyday people who have to work with these things don't really see. As we said before, most people see this as hurdles, and what you're really painting here is this conversation that can happen that really makes everyone more productive and better off.
Definitely.
I feel like we could talk for hours, but that would be unfair to your time. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our segment.
Awesome.
But I think this was a master class. Everyone should watch this again. And
I had so much fun. Thank you, Robert.
We should definitely talk again. But yeah, that's all we have for now.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye.
Bye.